te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere ake nei, we're racing through the alphabet up to case L now, the latest person with COVID in the community. And it turns out they went to work at a KFC. Property prices are dizzyingly high, so should real estate agents pay back millions in wage subsidies? A man shot dead by police, leaving Papatoetoe residents shaken and on edge. Is it time to pump the brakes on trucks crossing Auckland's Harbour Bridge? And speaking of wheels, COVID's making it more expensive to get some to buzz around in. Fiji's clandestine drug labs and the Queen with a bit of advice on the COVID vaccine. And the young runner tipped to etch his name alongside Snell, Walker and Lovelock.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata with DNA. The Prime Minister says rule breaking by people recently infected with COVID-19 has been a source of frustration. On Wednesday, it was revealed a now positive case that went to work and visited a vape store when they were supposed to be isolating. Then yesterday, the ministry announced a family whose members later tested positive had hosted a private home viewing on Sunday. Jacinda Ardern says non-compliance is frustrating but should not be condemned too harshly.
One of the things we need is an environment where people can feel like even if they've made the wrong choice, even if they've gotten tested later than they should have, that they still do what we need them to do. And if we have a massive pile-in, that creates an environment where people are afraid to get tested, where they may not do what we need them to do.
Jacinda Ardern. Papatoetoe High School will reopen on Monday. Closed last week after a student tested positive for COVID-19. It reopened on Monday but closed again the next day after another student returned a positive result. Almost the entire school has been retested and only people who provide a negative result can return next week. Another community case reported today has brought to 12 the number linked to the Papatoetoe outbreak. Some Papatoetoe residents are in shock after a shooting last night from which a man died. The police were called to an Avis Avenue house at about 6 o'clock after a shot was fired through the window of a neighbouring home. At about 8:30, a man came out of the first house with a firearm and was shot by officers. He was 34-year-old Tangaru Noere Turia of Auckland. The chair of the Otara Papatoetoe local board, Lotu Fuli, says people are upset.
Last night's incident was obviously very shocking and upsetting for the community. I know that people were concerned and there was a lot of online chatter about what had happened. Of course, our hearts go out to the people in Papatoetoe because they are going through quite a lot.
Lotu Fuli says she hopes the shooting does not put people off going to get a COVID test if they need to. All 17 inmates charged with causing major damage at Waikeria prison last month have pleaded not guilty. The men, who are jointly charged with rioting, burglary, using a weapon and willfully setting fire to property and endangering life, appeared in the Hamilton District Court today. A building at the King Country prison, known as Top Jail, was badly damaged by fire after the inmates took to the roof and stayed there for 6 days. 16 of the men appeared via video link and 1 in person. All chose trial by jury and were remanded in custody until early May. Immigration New Zealand is standing by its decision to grant a visa to the partner of Green MP Ricardo Menendez-March. It says the application was treated like any other. Here's our Deputy Political Editor Craig McCulloch.
The head of Immigration New Zealand, Greg Patchell, promised to look into the case yesterday after National MPs questioned whether there had been any special treatment. The department now says Mr Patchell has reviewed the file and can confirm it was processed in the normal manner. National wants to know why the visa was granted when the couple were living in different countries, but the department says the application met all the relevant criteria. Mr Menendez-March has repeatedly insisted he and his partner did everything above board. From Parliament, Craig McCulloch.
Air New Zealand has suspended all quarantine-free flights from New Zealand to Australia until Sunday because of the latest restrictions imposed by Australia because of the Auckland breakout. The airline has also stopped taking new bookings for Sydney and Melbourne until March the 6th and until March the 10th for Brisbane. 3 quarantine-free flights from Auckland to Sydney, 2 from Auckland to Melbourne and 3 from Auckland to Brisbane have been cancelled. And just a hand, Boeing 737 MAX aircraft have been cleared to fly again in New Zealand. It's 4 minutes past 5. England are in a dominant position, chasing victory over the White Ferns in the second one-day cricket international in Dunedin. Batting first, New Zealand were all out for 192, Brooke Halliday top scoring with 60. A short time ago, England were 155 for 3 after 33 overs. England lead the three-match series 1-0. There's no room for complacency for the Crusaders as they chase their fifth straight Super Rugby title. As they prepare to take on the Highlanders in the opening game in Dunedin tonight, coach Scott Robertson says the desire for success hasn't waned.
We talk about how we can evolve our game and how we can keep our people connected, how we can get them excited and inspired to go again. That's sort of my focus. And look, I just love coming in, and the infectious part carries over to the group.
Scott Robertson. The Hurricanes host the Blues tomorrow night. New Zealand golfer Lydia Ko has a two-shot lead after the opening round of the latest LPGA event in Florida. She shot a 7 under par 65 at the Gainbridge tournament on her home course, opening her round with an eagle before firing 6 birdies and a bogey. Ko says she knows the best way to play the course.
Being on the fairways is key because the whole team have done a great job of growing the rough and making it pretty tough. So overall pretty solid and definitely nice to be able to start the tournament in a positive way.
Ko gets underway for round 2 just after 2 o'clock tomorrow morning. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, Sister Helen Prejean, author of Dead Man Walking and tireless opponent of the death penalty in the United States. Economist Dr. Gerog Karajolu on how we can achieve intergenerational well-being. Former Black Panther Emery Douglas and John Belushi's widow Judy on a new documentary about the comic genius. I'm Kim Hill. Join me Saturday morning after 8 here on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel Peninsula and Gisborne. Partly cloudy, a few showers in the east. Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, cloudy morning and night, otherwise fine. Waikato to Wellington, including Bay of Plenty and Central High Country. Fine spells, but isolated showers inland. For Marlborough and Nelson, mainly fine. Isolated showers inland, some possibly heavy. Westland and Fiordland, occasional rain clearing tomorrow morning. Isolated showers inland tomorrow afternoon and evening. Canterbury, mostly cloudy with patchy drizzle. Scattered showers, some heavy, developing inland tomorrow. For Otago and Southland, mainly fine. Scattered showers tomorrow, some heavy during the afternoon and evening. Chatham Islands, fine spells. RNZ National, it's 7 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Tonight, house prices are through the roof, so should real estate firms pay back their wage subsidies? And remember our story from last night, the almost 8-hour wait to get through to the COVID health line? Well, caller, that wasn't the only excruciating case. But first, more people are having to self-isolate tonight after another person linked to the February cluster broke the rules before testing positive. This new case, labelled Al, is a household contact of a Papatoetoe student who tested positive on Tuesday. They worked a shift at KFC Botany Downs earlier this week before going into quarantine on Tuesday. They're the second person from the same family to ignore the call to isolate for 14 days. And that's left the Prime Minister a little annoyed.
Oh, no question. Of course, like everyone, frustrated. But at the same time, one of the things we need is an environment where people can feel like even if they've made the wrong choice, even if they've gotten tested later than they should have, that they still do what we need them to do. And if we have a massive pile-in, that creates an environment where people are afraid to get tested, where they may not do what we need them to do. So we've constantly got to manage that.
And that was Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern. Now, Checkpoint's Louise Tanuth is at KFC Botany and she joins me now. Evening, Louise. What do we know about this new case?
Yes, so this current case is of course linked to the previous Auckland February COVID cases. They're currently in quarantine and of course they were working here at KFC Botany Downs on Monday between around 3:30 p.m. through to Tuesday at 12:30 a.m. Now, it's important to note that, of course, they shouldn't have been here at work. They should have been self-isolating, as mentioned, much to the frustration of the Prime Minister at today's press conference. Now, they were tested on arrival in quarantine and originally produced a negative result, but that, of course, has turned into a positive. And they are actually potentially still contagious in those 48 hours, even if not displaying symptoms. So the workplace KFC Botany Downs is, of course, a location of interest. That brings 11 close contacts out to the forefront who worked at the same time from Monday through till Tuesday. They all need to self-isolate and get tested. And of course, KFC Botany Downs is closed and has undergone an immense deep clean.
So, Louise, those are the close contacts. What do we know about advice to people who maybe just popped in for a burger and chips on the same shift that this worker was there?
Yes, so everyone who entered the store between 3:30pm through to about 12:30am on that Tuesday when the worker was here are deemed close contacts. They need to isolate and get a negative test on day 5, which is tomorrow, and then produce another one again on day 12. Now, drive-through customers are actually even deemed casual plus, so it's the same deal for them. They need to isolate and produce that negative day 5 test. The Ministry of Health has indicated they'll be introducing another pop-up centre here in East Auckland to meet that demand.
Okay, so this is one of the cases down the line from the original Papatoetoe High School case. So what is happening with the school?
Now, Principal Vaughan Queo has indicated that things are looking pretty good looking ahead till Monday. He's pretty hopeful, but there's still a group of around 50 people who are yet to return that negative test. So again, they haven't got the official go-ahead. They do that negative test before they can go back to school, but as we know in the Papatoetoe community, they're itching to get back to school and they just want to get back to learning.
Thanks, Louise. That is Louise Tanous, who's joining us live outside the KFC in Botany, where the latest community case of COVID, that is case L, worked a shift there on Tuesday through to Wednesday morning, I think it was. If you want to check out what your status is, go onto the Ministry of Health website, go to the places of interest. All the instructions are there about how you'll be classified and what action you need to take. Real estate agents are under fire for failing to repay millions of dollars in wage subsidies, despite record property prices and a booming market. Checkpoint can reveal more than $13 million was paid out to the real estate industry. Auckland-based Barfoot and Thompson received $4 million alone. Nita Blake-Person reports.
As COVID slammed into New Zealand's economy, many feared the housing market would tank. Level 4 lockdown cancelled property viewings and most sales ground to a halt, with agents and their colleagues accessing the wage subsidy to get by. Those costs reached more than $13 million for various businesses. Bindi Norwell is the Chief Executive of the Real Estate Institute of New Zealand and says many suffered significant financial loss.
This was available for businesses across New Zealand in terms of the COVID wage subsidy, and they had to provide evidence that they'd had financial loss. So, yeah, I mean, I'm assuming that we had many organisations had significant financial loss during that COVID lockdown.
Some of the biggest claims in the real estate industry were from the biggest players, Barfoot and Thompson receiving more than $4 million for 600 employees. Property Brokers Limited received $1.9 million, Bailey's Real Estate got $1.4 million, Eves Realty $500,000. But many real estate agents are self-employed and earn commission, so exactly how each payout has worked is different.
There's no one size fits all really, and so it really will depend on how their structures work. So whether they're a franchise, whether it's a head office, we're talking, whether it's a branch, whether they have salaried individuals versus agents who are commission based as well. So it really depends on so many factors. So it's really important that people understand there's no one size fits all with the real estate industry.
And while many of those employees met the wage subsidy criteria of a predicted or experienced 30% drop in revenue, the fears about a tanking housing market never eventuated. In fact, things are hotter than they've been in years. In September, there were more houses sold than in the previous 42 months. January house prices were up 12.8% on a year earlier, the highest annual growth since March 2017. Auckland University philosophy professor Tim Deer studies business ethics.
Give them the benefit of the doubt. When they applied for the subsidy in the beginning, perhaps they really anticipated that their incomes were going to drop dramatically. And so perhaps when they applied, they met the terms and they applied in good faith. However, now in retrospect, when you look at it, they're an area where that just didn't happen. And so, yes, I would hope, especially an enterprise the size of Barfoot and Thompson, I would hope that they would think, here's an opportunity to do the right thing. We can afford to do it. We should show that we are ethical regardless of the technical legal entitlement.
But he says given how the housing markets performed, the real estate industry should return that cash.
It had to rely on trust. It had to be done on low checking in order to get support into people's hands. And so it's particularly disappointing that, having been given an opportunity to act appropriately, to show themselves to be trustworthy, some industries have basically, bluntly, I think, been greedy and have taken the subsidy and thought, to hell with the social contract and being trustworthy, and we've got the money in our pockets, so we're going to keep it. And I think that's deeply disappointing.
Barfoot and Thompson's made some minor repayments to its $4 million take. Last year it repaid $5,272.20 relating to staffing changes, or 0.13% of its total take. It did not respond to requests for comment. Overall, $716 million in wage subsidies has been paid back. The Ministry for Social Development says 1,011 cases have been referred for investigation, 457 have been resolved, and 386 are underway. To date, no charges have been laid. MSD says decisions on enforcement and recovery are being made in the coming weeks and months. For Checkpoint, Cornita Blake-Persson-Aho.
Let us know what you think about that. Should those real estate companies pay back the wage subsidy? You can text us on 2101 or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. It is almost 16 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. And still to come on the programme is Auckland's Harbour Bridge straining under the weight of trucks. A man shot dead by police in South Auckland last night fired a gun into the house of a family he didn't know. Police say the 34-year-old Tangaru Noere Turia was acting erratically before he came out of a house brandishing a weapon. He refused to drop it and officers fired. The incidents left residents in the usually quiet Papatoetoe neighbourhood shaken. Our reporter Sarah Robson was at the scene and filed this story.
When Avis Avenue resident Sandy got home just before 6 o'clock last night, she heard a big bang. The last thing she expected it to be was a gunshot.
I thought it was somebody's tyres, because you wouldn't think so. And there was roadworks going, so I thought that's normal. But then a few hours, as shortly after, when we went to park the car on the road, then we were told to get inside, and just immediately.
Police cars were everywhere, the armed offenders squad and dogs on the ground, the police chopper overhead.
And then later on I heard also like loud screaming, yelling, and then 3 gunshots as well, around 8 as well, and it was like quite shaken and inside the home and like in lockdown.
The first shot was the 34-year-old man firing a gun into the window of a house while a family he didn't know were inside. County's Manukau Police District Commander, Superintendent Jill Rogers, explained what happened next.
At around 8:30 last evening, the male unexpectedly exited from the house. He was still holding the firearm and brandishing it around and continuing to display his erratic behaviour, at which time he was shot by police.
She says officers had a range of tactical options available, but their negotiations failed and the man's behaviour became increasingly erratic. When he suddenly appeared with a gun and refused to drop it, the decision was made to use lethal force.
It is the worst possible decision that a police officer has to make to take someone's life. The circumstances as they presented last night were at that end.
Jill Rogers says the man was known to police and he was already facing charges. Support is being offered to the man's family, who are in Auckland and Australia, as well as the officers involved in last night's incident.
We have family liaison working alongside the deceased family. We also have strong support around our own police staff, and that involves psychological support for them as well.
There was a heavy police presence on Avis Avenue this morning, with cordons in place as detectives carried out their scene examination. Poko's lived in the area for about 30 years, and she says nothing like this has happened before.
Never come across it myself in the whole time we've been here. So we hear the choppers all the time, but it's normally over the other way, not this close to home.
A police critical incident investigation has been launched and the Independent Police Conduct Authority has been notified. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Sarah Robson, aho.
The brakes won't go on trucks on Auckland's Harbour Bridge for at least a decade, if at all, according to Waka Kotahi. On average, about 170,000 vehicles cross the bridge every day, and over the years it's been reinforced several times with various bits bolted on. But this week it's been revealed further strengthening is not possible. Now that's raised concerns about whether it can cope with heavy traffic over the next few years, or if limits need to be put on trucks crossing the bridge. Waka Kotahi's Brett Glidden talks us through the options.
The first thing is you want to maintain the bridge so that it can continue to carry traffic. So that is what we do. We have a dedicated team maintaining that bridge. The next thing is that we've spent billions of dollars building the Western Ring route, so we've got an alternate route. So there's options now for heavy vehicles. If they're going in a slightly different direction, they don't have to use the Harbour Bridge. They can use the Western Ring route and the other bridge that's further up the harbour. The third thing that we look at doing, and some of this already applies for overweight vehicles using the bridge, is that you don't put them on the clip-ons, you put them on the centre span. And then if you were continuing to go into the future and we're still needing to do further restrictions, you would look at the time of day. So during the middle of the day, it's not such an issue because there's lots of light vehicles running across it, so the trucks are spread out. It's in the early morning that you might want to think about how you space the trucks across the bridge. But that's a real extreme event down the track, and we're nowhere near that at the moment.
How far down the track might you have to look at telling trucks, between these hours you're not allowed on the bridge?
Yeah, so I think this is where there's a lot of misinformation. It's no time soon. So I don't have an exact date because it's all driven by growth and the number of heavy vehicles, but I can't see it happening for another 10, 20, 30 years, or we may never get there, but it definitely is not anytime soon. The bridge is operating absolutely fine the way it is. We don't have to restrict heavy vehicles across the bridge at the moment. They're free to run across it. Like I say, if they're overloaded vehicles, they have to use the truss, but that's been in place for a number of years. And in fact, when we did the strengthening back in the early 2000s, we had restrictions on the bridge and we weren't allowing trucks to run on the clip-on. So we've been in a scenario like this before when we were doing the work. So it's nothing new to truckies, but there's no concern that we're anywhere near doing that at the moment.
Okay, Brett, so just to be clear, in your view, given what you know, it's at least a decade away to having to make a decision about rerouting trucks.
Absolutely. From what we know today, from the growth that we see on the bridge, and remember it goes up and down. So, we had strong growth in the early 2000s, and then the financial crisis hit in 2008, and that growth dropped off. Less product was being moved around, and we saw the heavy vehicles drop away. The growth has come back. And then we've had COVID hit, and we've seen a slight drop off again with the amount of vehicles using the bridge and the heavy vehicles. So it goes in waves. It's not just a continuous line. So you never know what's going to happen into the future. But at the moment, with the strengthening we've done, the capacity we have in that bridge, the way we maintain it, the diversion we already get because trucks have got options, we're not seeing any restrictions anytime soon. All the message that we were saying to the Select Committee was that at a point, a bridge can only take so much load. The harbour, it's not unique to the Harbour Bridge. This applies to any bridge. There's a point where it can take no more. And if you ever got there, you would have to think about how you manage that because we want that bridge there indefinitely. We want to keep that bridge in operation for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, so the bridge opened in 1959, right? So you said when you build a bridge, you've got a time frame in mind. How long is that bridge supposed to stay up for? Well,
normally when you design a bridge, you talk about a 100-year design life, but that doesn't mean that in 100 years then suddenly you have to replace the bridge. And when you get a structure like this, and there's similar structures around the world, you'll find that the road controlling authorities are looking to maintain it indefinitely, and that's our view as well. So we don't have a view that it will end on a certain date and we're going to replace it. We maintain it so that it will be in place forever. So that means you have a much more focused maintenance regime than maybe you would have on a smaller bridge on a state highway somewhere. So we think about this as being here forever and making sure that we can maintain the amount of traffic we need to indefinitely into the future. I think the other point is to remember too is, of course, when the bridge was designed, it was designed back in the 1950s. I don't think anyone probably thought the amount of traffic and the size and weight of the heavy vehicles into the future, so that the bridge is being asked to do way more than it ever was back when it was constructed. So it's really important that we continue to maintain it and strengthen it like we have, so that we can continue to provide that access across the harbour.
And just to be clear, you've stuck as much reinforcement, strengthening, call it what you will, that bridge can take. You know, you had the accident last year, you had to do some reinforcing. You can't just keep tacking on.
Yeah, that's right. So if you think of the bridge in two ways, there's the weight of the bridge, and then there's the weight of vehicles that run on the bridge, and it's balancing the two. So the more weight you put into the structure itself, that takes away the ability for vehicles to use it. So you're using up its capacity because it has an ultimate capacity. We have got the maximum we can get to as far as the weight of the bridge, so putting extra steel into it. So now all we can play with is the weight that uses the bridge. So it's in a really good place. That means that we're getting the absolute maximum we can get out of it because we've strengthened it to the absolute maximum that the bridge can handle, and now we just have to operate it. So, look, I think it's in a really good space in that regard. No more strengthening is needed. We just have to keep maintaining it indefinitely so it's there for another 100 years.
Brett Glidden, Transport Services General Manager for Waka Kotahi NZTA. And as he said there, no need to restrict truck movements, probably for the next 10 years, possibly longer. But should we do it anyway? Should we make trucks go the long way round to get traffic flowing faster and more efficiently over the bridge? Let us know your thoughts. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. And let's stay with traffic for the moment. Here is a quick traffic update. There are significant delays on State Highway 1 north of Wellington due to a broken down truck. It's blocking the southbound lane just south of Paikakariki Hill Road and is affecting traffic in both directions, but is worse heading north. While the truck should be moved shortly, the northbound queues are expected to take some time to clear, and Waka Kotahi is advising motorists heading north out of Wellington towards Kapiti to delay travel if you can. Immigration New Zealand says there was no special treatment for Green MP Ricardo Menendez March when it granted his partner a visa. His partner was living in Mexico and was granted a 6-month visitor visa in January, while the Green MP was also in Mexico. Immigration was grilled at a select committee yesterday about the processes used to grant the visa, and officials went back to check if there was anything untoward going on. Our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch, joins me now. Craig, remind us, why were questions being asked about this visa in the first place?
Good evening, Lisa. Well, there was a big select committee meeting here at Parliament yesterday. All the immigration bosses there. There was the head of Immigration New Zealand, Greg Patchell, also Carolyn Tremaine, who's the chief executive of MBN. The National Party used the opportunity, basically, to grill down into this case, to dig into the details, to find out, basically, whether there was any special treatment. That's what they wanted to find out. Erica Stanford, National MP, particularly brought up the case of some of her constituents who she said had been having real trouble getting their own partners back into New Zealand, and seemingly here Ricardo Menendez March didn't seem to have too much trouble. His partner didn't seem to have too much trouble. She put a hypothetical to Mr. Patchell, except it wasn't really much of a hypothetical. She said if there were two people, say two hypothetical people, and they were in two different countries, in two different homes, would they hypothetically meet the criteria required to come into the country? Now, though that criteria firstly is to be in a genuine and stable relationship, and also that they be living together. Now, Mr. Patchell said that he did not know the exact details. He was not across the full requirements, but on the face of it, it did not seem, he said, on probably that would not meet the criteria. It obviously raises big questions for National, because this case here with Ricardo Menendez March and his partner, they obviously were not living together. They were in different countries. They were in different homes. They only seemed to live together for a short amount of time prior to the pandemic, while Mr. Menendez March, was in Mexico prior to the pandemic. So big questions there. Mr. Patchell said that he would go away, he would take a look at it, and he has come back, and here we are today.
And so they are utterly convinced that there was no special treatment here, despite the fact that these two people were living apart?
Yes, we have a statement from Immigration New Zealand, and it is pretty clear-cut. It says here, Greg has now had the opportunity to view the file. He can confirm that the application was processed in the normal manner via an authorised decision maker and was approved as it met the immigration instructions. No escalations or interventions occurred, as the application was treated like any other for that category. So that's where it ends for Immigration New Zealand. It's satisfied that everything was above board, that it handled everything appropriately. I've actually gone back to the department to seek a little bit more clarity about that living together condition, because it seems on the face of it that that's not quite clear yet. It seems it's not quite as strict perhaps as Mr Patchell made out yesterday in that select committee hearing around the requirement to be living together. I spoke to Ricardo Menendez March yesterday after that select committee hearing. He, for his part, said that he believed that all due process had been carried out by the immigration officials and indeed by him and his partner. He said they put forward a really comprehensive package to Immigration New Zealand, that they had lived together prior to the pandemic, and that was enough basically to satisfy Immigration New Zealand, and it seems to be that is the case.
Thanks, Craig. That is our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch, joining us from Parliament. And coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, drugs more lethal than meth are being cooked up in Fiji. The Queen opens up about getting the COVID-19 vaccine, and we'll have some more of your feedback after the news headlines. So do keep them coming. You can text us on 2101, you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can get to contact us through Facebook, Checkpoint RNZ. Let's go to the headlines now with Susanna.
The Prime Minister says rule breaking by people with COVID-19 is frustrating but should not be condemned too harshly. On Wednesday, it was revealed a now positive case went to work and visited a store when they were supposed to be isolating. And yesterday, the Health Ministry said a family whose members later tested positive had hosted a private house viewing on Sunday. Papatoetoe High School will reopen on Monday after almost all of the school community has been tested twice for COVID-19. It closed last week after a student was infected and reopened briefly before closing again on Tuesday due to another positive case. There are now 12 people in the Papatoetoe cluster. Some Papatoetoe residents are in shock after a shooting in Avis Avenue last night from which a man died. The police were called after a shot was fired, and when a man later came out of a house brandishing a firearm, he was shot by officers. A local community leader says she hopes the shooting won't stop people going to get a COVID test if they need to. All 17 men charged over a riot at Waikeria prison last month have pleaded not guilty and chosen trial by jury. They appeared in the Hamilton District Court today and were remanded in custody until early May. Immigration New Zealand says a visa granted to the partner of Green MP Ricardo Menendez March was treated like any other. National wanted to know why the visa was granted when they were living in different countries, but the department says the application met all the relevant criteria. Air New Zealand has suspended all quarantine-free flights to Australia until Sunday after Canberra imposed restrictions due to Auckland's COVID outbreak. The airline has also stopped taking new bookings for Sydney and Melbourne until March the 6th and until March the 10th for Brisbane. Boeing 737 MAX aircraft have been cleared to fly again in New Zealand after two fatal crashes which killed 346 people in Indonesia and Ethiopia. The Civil Aviation Authority says it will work with any future operators on a case-by-case basis. Those are the latest news headlines on RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora anō. This is Checkpoint, and it's time now for the business news with Nicholas Poynton. Nicholas, I pick we're going to be talking about Auckland ports, so they've...
No. Ports of Tauranga.
Ports of Tauranga,
They
okay.
are the biggest port in this country, and who, despite having lower cargo volumes, fewer ships coming through the port, have managed to post a net profit for the 6 months to December, up 2% on last year. And how they managed to do that was there was various other businesses it owns or has stakes in. So has stakes in stevedoring, logistics, also has stakes in the ports of Timaru and Northland. So its revenue from all of this has helped lift its overall result. But by being such a big port, the chief executive can give us some pretty interesting insights to what's going on in terms of imports and exports. And one of the interesting things that he had to say was about these congestion issues we are as a country facing. He says the delays for the imports, yes, that's clearly an issue. If we can't bring goods into the country, then, retailers and whatnot, they can't sell them. But he says the real issue is those struggles to get exports overseas, because when you sell something overseas, that's new money coming into the economy. So that's where he saw the real issue being. And the company's CEO, he really took aim at the ports of Auckland, saying it needs to sort itself out pretty much. And his suggestion was, one of his suggestions to, he's not just a problems person, he's also a solutions guy. And he said Kiwi Rail needs to schedule more trains so we can move empty containers more effectively. But I'm not sure that's entirely a solution, because one story RNZ's business team did this week, which was buried under all the company earnings, was about the penalty fees shipping lines charge for empty containers that are not returned on time. And the way it works is shipping lines, they hire out their containers. There's an agreed to time at which it has to be returned to. Don't get it back in time, you're slapped with a penalty fee. But the storage facilities at the moment, they are at capacity. And get this, the importers, the logistics companies who are hiring out the containers are still getting slapped with these penalty fees. There was, the story referenced one case where a firm was charged $8,500 for a container that they just simply could not return. So now you have the Freight Forwarders Association, they're now lobbying the government to lobby the shipping lines to scrap these fees altogether for about a 6-month period.
Because just to put it in context, the positioning of the containers is really important, because it's what, obviously you pack your goods in, and it has knock-on effects. If they don't have empty containers to then repack and send on in the right places dotted around the globe, you run into problems.
And we have specific needs in terms of our exports. They need to be suitable to send food overseas.
Yeah.
So not all the containers we're getting into this country can actually be used to go back overseas. So this whole situation, it is a mess. There is no quick and easy solution. But despite all this uncertainty, the ports of Tauranga, they believe they can handle the storm and deliver a full year profit.
And you've got an update on GameStop?
Yeah, I do have an update on GameStop, but before I get to that, I thought I'd just quickly jump in and, we've had plenty of stories. Well, this week has been huge for company earnings, and there've been plenty of stories about tourism companies and how they've been struggling. We've heard a lot of anecdotes, but I feel like numbers tell a different story altogether. And one of the results we got today, I just want to touch on this, was Tourism Holdings. They own camper vans and tourism-related businesses. Its half-year profit down 114% on a year ago. They've posted a $1.8 million loss. That's compared with last year's $13 million profit. Some good signs for the company. They have managed to pay down some debt, but they've done that by selling off a number of vehicles that it owns. And it's clear that things for this company, they are not going to be easy. It's one of those, it just speaks to the fact that so many businesses out there are relying on those borders opening.
Yeah, interesting.
But to GameStop, though, look, this story has shown that it's too good to go away, really. GameStop stock has shot up overnight, up 101% in Wall Street trading. That follows one of the most historic short squeezes in recent history. That original surge, if we remember, that was between retail investors squaring off against the billion-dollar Wall Street traders in what was very much a David and Goliath style battle, with David really taking the win there. The big Wall Street firms lost billions in that battle. But this new surge has been kicked off by something very different, a cryptic message of sorts. One of the company's directors for GameStop tweeted out an ice cream emoji. And that was enough to send the retail traders off. Its share price has now doubled overnight. And I feel like we're now moving into a place where this company, its stock, it's now seen as like a meme. It's a joke. It's a novelty. And people are just having fun with it. But that fun has triggered a series of warnings from market analysts saying that, look, if you're going to invest in this, please don't pour all your money into this. There's no such thing as a one-way bet. Diversify your portfolio, please.
And what about other numbers from the market?
Yeah, so the NZX, it finished up for, in the first time, what feels like weeks really. It's up 87 points to 12,227. Our dollar, 73.6 US cents, 93.8 Australian.
Thanks, Nicholas. Nicholas Poynton with our business news there. Now, if you're in the market for a new car and have been holding out for prices to drop, you may be out of luck. A vehicle shortage caused by the pandemic has seen the average sale price for both new and used cars climb since the middle of last year, with predictions once supply returned, prices would go down. Supply is starting to come back, but as Emma Hatton reports, prices aren't budging.
Stats NZ data shows the average price for a small car in June last year was just under $15,000. It's now over $18,000. It's the same jump for a medium-sized car, now going for about $25,000. And a large car, which you could get for about $34,000 in March last year, is now averaging $40,000. Richie East from the buy-sell website Auto Trader says from about April last year, prices were only heading one way.
With the lockdown last year, so new vehicle production and things stopped overseas. So that actually forced the increase of demand and the prices of vehicles, particularly in Japan. And that's where most of our vehicles are sourced from. So we saw prices go up probably around 10-15%.
Although not back to pre-COVID levels, he says supply is starting to flow again, with about 30,000 vehicles now online, up from 27,000 at the end of last year. Despite this, he doesn't see prices dropping.
I think that could almost be the new normal, but at the same time, prices have definitely levelled off, and I don't think they're probably going to go up any further than what we're seeing at the moment. But I think the prices where they're at the moment will probably hold for a good 6 or 12 months.
That's compounded by the delay in the global production of new cars due to a shortage of semiconductor computer chips. Mr. East says on the upside for car owners, their existing cars will have depreciated slower and low interest rates make getting a vehicle loan cheaper. He says this is making luxury vehicles like Ford Mustangs hot property.
Speaking to a dealer just yesterday, actually, they said they just can't get their hands on enough of them, really, and they're just selling like hotcakes. You know, it's just like caravans or boats or even property people are spending internally rather than going on a luxury holiday overseas.
But if COVID created waves for the motor industry in New Zealand, David Vinson of the Vehicle Import Association says the proposed fuel economy standards will cause a tsunami.
I was speaking with a representative of one of the manufacturers' distributors, in other words, the people who import and distribute new vehicles, and they've just done the analysis based on this fuel economy standards legislation, and they think it's going to add an extra $4,500 per vehicle to everything in their model range.
He says this will have a much bigger effect on car prices than the lockdown did. The head of the company that runs the Too Cheap used car business, Carl Smith, agrees. He says prices should soften as supply levels return to normal, but things will heat up when the new standards come in.
Everybody's going to be fighting for the same volumes of second-hand EVs. So I think unless the price point can be lowered via some governmental support, as has happened in many countries in Europe, it will be priced out of our range.
Which begs the question, if you're looking for a new or replacement car, when's the best time to get it?
I'd always say now, because the prices are not going to get any cheaper.
That's the final word from David Vinson. Don't pump the brakes if you're looking for some new wheels. For Checkpoint, Emma Hatton.
A prisoner who raped and forced his young cellmate to perform oral sex on him almost every night for 3 months will be deported back to Fiji after his sentence. At the High Court in Wellington today, 31-year-old Benjamin Neelish Gaunda was given an indefinite sentence. He will have to serve 10 years and be assessed as safe before he can be released. Gaunda was found guilty in November on 9 charges, including common assault, sexual violation and threatening to kill. Our reporter Charlotte Cook was in court today in a warning. Parts of her report are distressing.
Benjamin Neelish Gaunda was already in Remataka prison for violent sexual offending against a teenage girl. It was here where he found his next victim. The man was 18 years old at the time and the youngest person in prison. Gaunda befriended him, moving him into his cell on the promise of movies, food and a better time. Justice Karen Clark says from the first night he asked for sexual favours and hit the victim when he refused. The abuse continued until he did what Gaunda asked.
One day, almost a fortnight later, you told Em to come down from his bunk. He refused. He said he was over this. Em told you he was going to move out the next day. You pulled out a shank and said that if Em didn't come down, you were going to stab him. You told him that if he moved out, you would kill him. You forced Em to perform oral sex on you almost every night.
Justice Clark says the offending was essentially continuous for 80 days. The victim's impact statement was read aloud to the court. It said he still saw Gaunda's face everywhere he looked and felt that he would never get away from him.
Ben, in this statement, I have been asked to explain the emotional harm your actions have had on me. I really felt and feel like you should not get that privilege and that you don't deserve to know this. In all honesty, I don't really know where to begin. I thought it would be easy because I've spent so long thinking about what I would say if given the chance.
The victim says he feels isolated and unable to trust people. Justice Clark says reports show Gaunda has a high risk of reoffending and takes no responsibility for his behaviour.
You say you are disappointed in your actions, but you have shown no remorse for the victims of your offending. You appeared to the report writer to only be disappointed in the way your actions have impacted on your life, including that you will be deported to Fiji on release from prison.
The judge says he even made inappropriate sexual remarks and flirtatious behaviour to the female psychologist assessing him. The reports describe his behaviour as entitled and domineering with sadistic, degrading and cruel components. He also shows little attempt at rehabilitative programs. Justice Clark says as his previous 16 years in prison did not curb his violent offending, he was given a preventive detention sentence. Gaunda must serve at least 10 years, but will be kept in prison if he cannot prove he is safe for release. In Wellington for Checkpoint, Charlotte Cook.
Lady Gaga's dog walker has been shot during a robbery in Los Angeles and her 2 dogs stolen. The singer is offering an almost 700,000 New Zealand dollar reward for information. CNN's Reid Binion has more.
Police tape lined a Los Angeles street late Wednesday night. The man lying on the ground is Lady Gaga's dog walker, who had been shot with a semi-automatic handgun. Police say the gunman then snatched Gaga's French bulldogs, Koji and Gustave, and took off.
I'm sure that this dog walker probably does this every day at the same time. Obviously, the perpetrators knew. They came armed and prepared to hurt him in order to get these dogs.
Police say the suspect who took the 2 bulldogs is a male, and he fled the scene in a white sedan.
While they may not have known it was her dog, they certainly knew that it belonged to somebody with a little coin in their pocket.
A source close to the Grammy Award-winning singer says Gaga is offering $500,000 to anyone who has her 2 dogs. No questions asked.
I'm certain that the dogs are chipped. It's only a matter of time before they find the perpetrators. And while Lady Gaga may not have questions, I guarantee you robbery homicide will, because this is not just a theft of an animal. Someone was seriously injured and may have long-term repercussions as a result of this gunshot wound.
I'm Reid Binion reporting.
It is 16 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Now, after 6 tonight, call waiting, the almost 8 hours on hold trying to get through to Healthline. The story we brought you last night, the woman we spoke to, well, she wasn't alone. As the European Union struggles to roll out coronavirus vaccines, EU leaders meet today to discuss speeding up the process. The pace is lagging behind both the UK and the US, mostly due to delays in deliveries of the doses. The UK, for instance, has vaccinated about 27 people for every 100. In the EU, it's about 6 people in 100. And part of that is because so many people don't want to get the jab. The BBC's Jean McKenzie reports.
None of the queues they'd planned for. Inside, chairs sit empty. Belgium's largest vaccination centre finally opened last week, but there's barely a person in sight. They have the capacity to vaccinate 5,000 people a day, but today they say they've only done 200. And in the hour that we've been here, we've seen just one person arrive for their vaccination.
No, it's a pity there are not many people, but this afternoon it's very quiet because there are not enough vaccines at this moment in time.
It is quite shocking to arrive and see such a huge vaccination centre and to see it totally empty. Is that not disappointing for you?
Yes, of course it is, but what do you want me to say? Of course it's disappointing, but I cannot do anything about it.
Countries are struggling with a shortage of vaccines. Companies fail to deliver as many doses as expected. After a very public falling out between the EU and AstraZeneca, the British manufacturer says it should be able to provide 180 million doses from April. But in countries across Europe, some people have started to refuse the AstraZeneca shot.
I get maybe 4, 5, 6 emails every day of nurses, even medical doctors, saying they don't want the AstraZeneca vaccine, they refuse and they want to wait for a better vaccine, which is a bit strange because that's not really based on solid evidence or science. It's really based on perception and rumours.
Mixed messages by governments are partly to blame, with several countries, including France and Germany, deciding not to use the vaccine on older people yet. France's health minister getting his AstraZeneca vaccine live on television in an attempt to drum up support. While in Germany, hundreds of thousands of vials are sitting unused.
We have more AstraZeneca now than appointments.
Are people not turning up for their appointments then?
It happens, yeah. When we have 1,000 appointments, that maybe 50 people say, no, we don't want to have this vaccination, we don't want to have AstraZeneca.
Data from Scotland this week shows the AstraZeneca jab is helping to prevent nearly all hospitalisations.
What we want the vaccine to do is keep people out of the hospital, keep them out of intensive care, keep them from dying. And as far as I have seen, all vaccines that are on the market for the moment can do that.
But if vaccines are to find their way into enough arms, countries must now ramp up their production.
And that was Jean McKenzie reporting. The Queen's urging people to think about others when getting the COVID-19 vaccine. The 94-year-old received her first jab last month alongside her 99-year-old husband, Prince Philip, who's currently in hospital with a non-COVID infection. The monarch spoke about her experience on a virtual call with health officials overseeing the vaccine rollout in the UK.
Well, once you've had the vaccine, you have a feeling of you're protected, which is, I think, very important. And as far as I can make out, it was quite harmless. It was very quick. And I've had lots of letters from people who've been very surprised by how easy it was to get the vaccine. And the jab was it didn't hurt at all. I think the other thing is that it is obviously difficult for people to, if they've never had a vaccine, because they ought to think about other people rather than themselves.
And that was, of course, the Queen. In South Africa, firearms training sessions are being organised aimed at helping black women protect themselves. The country has some of the highest rates of violence in the world, and for many of the women, it's the first time they've ever picked up a gun. The BBC's Rodri Davies has more.
Don't forget to breathe.
Breathe and shoot. In South Africa, there are many guns, but there aren't many women handling them.
We're just used to men handling guns, and women, it's just a taboo for women to own guns, or let alone even handling a gun. So it's about time that changed, since we faced with so much in our country. So we need to learn to defend ourselves.
Defend themselves from nationwide violence that sees one woman murdered every 3 hours. So at this shooting range near Johannesburg, dozens of women are in training, discharging bullets, self-defense and self-confidence.
We're living in the 21st century. Every girl should equip themselves with the usage of a gun.
Today I'm not going to do this on my own.
The guns are provided by a campaign called Girls on Fire that offers gun safety and shooting training.
If you look at our country, statistically, the young black female is the most impacted by crime. We all are. I mean, all races and genders, but statistically, I just figured, young black women need to also know how to be their own first responders.
That's a response to still rising gun crime, rape cases, and a rate of femicide that's 5 times the global average. President Cyril Ramaphosa said in late 2019 that South Africa was one of the most unsafe places in the world to be a woman.
It's so important to empower women to look after themselves. We're not just, we don't have to sit in the corner and be victims.
And that was Rodri Davies reporting from South Africa. Their names etched in New Zealand sporting folklore: Peter Snell, Jack Lovelock, John Walker and Rod Dixon. And most recently, Nick Willis. But as the latter winds down his competitive career, there's another Kiwi looming as New Zealand's next middle distance running star. Clay Wilson has more on a 20-year-old from Tauranga with the talent and desire to add his name to that list of legends.
Willis of New Zealand, they'll be jumping up and down watching this. Adds his name to that of Peter Snell, John Walker, great New Zealand miler, gold for them.
Nick Willis has spent 2 decades running himself into New Zealand sports history. Now, as he strives for an Olympic swan song, Willis is passing the baton to a rising star, ready to write the country's next chapter of middle distance greatness. The 2-time Olympic 1500 metre medalist and Commonwealth Games gold medalist says Sam Tanner is capable of surpassing even those lofty achievements.
Sam's doing as good, if not better, than I was at the same age. We should be getting excited about the potential for that, and I certainly am. And I'm fortunate that he's come along at the end of my career, not in the middle of it, so I could win more New Zealand titles than if he was around. I probably would have been coming second to him most of the time.
Willis already knows that feeling. Tanner, a 20-year-old from Tauranga, has twice now beaten his hero, including earlier this month when he ran under the qualification mark for the Tokyo Olympics. Tanner's time at the New York meet also bettered Willis's New Zealand indoor 1500 metre record, to go with the 2 national junior records he has taken off him.
To break his records is pretty crazy, and for him to be in the race, it's actually really, really cool. And the best part is I think he's just super, super stoked when I get those times, and he gets to see the younger generation that he's kind of mentored come through and race really well.
Tanner is based in the US, on scholarship at the University of Washington in Seattle. He's earned himself the label the next Nick Willis. Such a tag brings big expectations, but he's ready and willing to embrace them.
It is a massive honour to be called the next Nick Willis or anything along those lines, like not many people get to be put in the same category as that. So yeah, I'm just really blessed to have the opportunity to be able to live up to those standards, and I think that excites me, and I think that actually drives your determination to get those times and get those records.
Tanner has booked his berth at the Olympics despite only fully committing to the sport 3 years ago. Even Willis admits he's been surprised by how rapid the rise has been.
I probably thought it might have taken a couple more years to get to this point, but he's got the perfect balance of utmost belief in himself and the talent to back it up. Often it's one or the other, and you need them both.
Those guiding Tanner's career also see that confidence. His New Zealand-based coach Craig Kirkwood says he sees and hears it every day.
He's got these massive aspirations and he's not afraid to just go after it. And if he doesn't reach that benchmark, then it won't really faze him. He'll just go into the next race and try again. That's that fear of failure, and she just doesn't have.
Much of that belief comes naturally. But Tanner says it also comes with growing up surfing and skateboarding on Papamoa Beach.
How scary is it to race one person compared to dropping in on a 14-foot vert ramp? That was probably my most crazy skating achievement, dropping on the Mount Maunganui vert ramp, which is 14 feet high. If you fail that, you could really screw yourself up. Failing a running race is not a very big deal.
All that remains is to transfer that mindset to the biggest stage. And joining Tanner at his first Olympics is adding to Willis's motivation to get to his last.
It will make my purpose of being there have so much more weight to it. It's not just about sort of ending the chapter for me, but I can actually play a greater role in helping transition him into that experience, since I've been there and done that so many times before.
So just what is the 20-year-old capable of in Tokyo and beyond? Given his natural levels of speed and endurance, Willis believes the sky is very much the limit. Tanner is on exactly the same page.
My goal's always been to medal at the Olympics, and from past experience and judging off what others have done, I think that I can hopefully win a gold in the 1500, so that's the goal.
A goal, if achieved, that would secure his place on that exclusive list of New Zealand middle distance legends. Moti hotaka o te ahi pōnei, ko Clay Wilson ahau.
Let's get to some of your feedback now, and boy, there is a lot of it, especially with respect to real estate agents and the wage subsidy and whether they should pay it back. This listener says the real estate industry not paying back the wage subsidy while benefiting from and contributing to rampant house price inflation is a bitter pill to swallow. Do the right thing, guys. Sue's got in touch to say, yep, real estate agents should repay the subsidy. It's ethically wrong for them to retain it. I did not notice any agents offering to discount their commission structure to help their customers affected by the pandemic. You can't have your cake and eat it too, says Sue. Angelo, in the same vein, says of course they should be paying it back. Real estate has been booming post-COVID and they are creaming it. Isn't this a little bit greedy and selfish, says Angelo. Wendy says real estate agents need to pay it back if they are now selling more than usual. Fair enough for admin staff, says Wendy. That is a good point, Wendy. Otherwise, she says scoundrels, followed by 4 exclamation marks. Phil says, I find the fact that these real estate companies applied and received the wage subsidy simply obscene. As one close to the industry, I see income generated by it through commission-driven property sales, often with little effort in the current climate, to be outrageous. These companies signed a statutory declaration that their income had declined, not that it might, and they should be investigated. This is disgraceful, that person says. In fact, most of you agree with that sentiment.
RNZ News at 6, ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leata at tēnei. An additional COVID testing centre is being set up in East Auckland to cope with an expected surge in the number of people wanting tests. The latest community case reported today worked at KFC's Botany Downs restaurant last Monday afternoon and evening while possibly being infectious. Botany MP Christopher Luxon says the new centre will be open tomorrow morning at Lloyd Elsmore Park.
It has been a really challenging week for the people of Botany. Kmart is a really frequented store. The consequence of that is then obviously a lot of residents need to go get COVID tests, and that has swamped our facilities, our testing facilities. That's been really just overrun and overloaded. So the good news is that we'll be able to run 2 testing facilities over the weekend.
Christopher Luxon. 2 new cases in managed isolation have also been reported today. The Prime Minister says rule breaking by recently infected people has been a source of frustration. On Wednesday, it was revealed a now positive case went to work and visited a vape store when they were meant to be isolating. The following day, it emerged the family of positive cases had hosted a private home viewing on Sunday. Jacinda Ardern says there is no question non-compliance is frustrating, but it's important not to pile on the criticism when people make mistakes. She says that tends to create an environment where people are afraid to get tested and do the right thing. The man who died in hospital after being shot by the police in Papatoetoe last night has been named. He was Tangaru Noere Turia, aged 34, of Auckland. The Police Association President Chris Cahill says it's a tragedy for everyone involved.
It's something that everyone involved in will be affected for the rest of their lives. The police officers, the trauma they go through, and some of this is great, that they will always have to live with this, and it's, as I say, a tragedy for everyone.
Chris Cahill says there will be a series of investigations into the man's death, including one by the Independent Police Conduct Authority. A prisoner who raped his young cellmate and forced him to perform oral sex will be deported back to Fiji after completing his sentence. At the High Court in Wellington today, 31-year-old Benjamin Nilesh Gunda was told he must serve at least 10 years and be assessed as safe before he can be released. Justice Clark said that from the day the 18-year-old, identified only as M, moved into his cell, Gunda demanded sexual favours.
One day, almost a fortnight later, you told Em to come down from his bunk. He refused. Em told you he was going to move out the next day. You pulled out a shank. You told him that if he moved out, you would kill him. You forced Em to perform oral sex on you almost every night.
Justice Clark said the offending was essentially continuous for 80 days. The Environment Minister David Parker is allowing 2,000 houses to be built next to a protected wetland north of Wellington. He says the plan change will provide new housing to meet demand while also protecting the environment. The Plymerton farm development has been widely opposed by environmental groups because of concerns about runoff into the nearby Taupo swamp. The developer also has a past conviction for environmental damage. Mr Parker's decision follows a recommendation from a panel of independent experts in the fields of ecology, planning, tikanga Māori, sedimentation, environmental law and urban design. The US House of Representatives has passed legislation amending the 1964 Civil Rights Act to include sexual orientation and gender identity as protected classes, in addition to race, religion, sex and national origin. Only 3 of the 211 Republican members of the House supported the bill. For the legislation to become law, it must get 60 votes in the Senate, where there is a 50-50 split between Democrats and Republicans. It's 4 minutes past 6. The White Ferns have gone down to another heavy defeat in their one-day international cricket series against England. They lost by 7 wickets in Dunedin today. The visitors wrapping up the 3-match series by reaching their target of 193 with more than 12 overs to spare. Newcomer Brooke Halliday was again a shining light for the home side, top scoring with 60 in her second international match. The teams stay in Dunedin for Game 3 on Sunday. Highlanders co-captain Ash Dixon is relishing the challenge of facing the Crusaders in tonight's Super Rugby Aotearoa season opener. The 2 South Island franchises kick off the competition at Forsyth Bar Stadium in Dunedin. Dixon says they're excited for the early test against the reigning champions.
Good to have them first up, I reckon. Playing the best of the best, you always want to see where you're at right at the start of the year. So obviously we'll play them later on in the game, but it's a great measure for us as a team and what we want to do this year. So really stoked actually to play them at home.
Ash Dixon. The game kicks off at 7:05. New Zealand football has confirmed the details of the new National League. In the women's competition, the best 4 club sides from the northern region and 4 sides from the rest of the country will compete for the national title. The men's competition features 30 teams in 3 regional leagues, with the top sides from each league qualifying for the championship phase.
Tonight on Nights, Kiwi pop sensation Benny selects a mixtape. Country life meets some troubled teens finding worth and purpose beyond the city limits. Daffodils are this week's Friday Night Live act. And because the first browser engine for the World Wide Web was launched on this day in 1991, we have a Sonic Tonic dedicated to the internet. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel Peninsula, also Gisborne, partly cloudy. A few showers in the east. Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, cloudy morning and night, otherwise fine. Waikato to Wellington, including Bay of Plenty and Central High Country. Fine spells, but isolated showers inland. Marlborough and Nelson, mainly fine. Isolated showers inland, some possibly heavy. Westland and Fiordland, occasional rain clearing tomorrow morning, but isolated showers inland tomorrow afternoon and evening. Canterbury, mostly cloudy with patchy drizzle. Scattered showers, some heavy developing inland tomorrow. Otago and Southland, mainly fine. Scattered showers tomorrow, some heavy during the afternoon and evening. Chatham Islands, fine spells. RNZ National, it's coming up to 7 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora anō. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Hold the line, caller. Well, technical problems and not enough people to answer the phone led to some epic waits to get through to Healthline. That's the diagnosis following a ministry review. Last night, Checkpoint brought you the story of Lisa Marie, who's been forced to self-isolate for 14 days after she went to Kmart Botany while an infected teenager was working there. Lisa Marie waited almost 8 hours on the phone to Healthline, Tuesday night through to early Wednesday morning, for someone to pick up so she could find out if her kids could still go to school.
After putting a few of my younger children to bed, I thought 10 to 10 at night was probably a really good time to call Healthline and find out just the position that we're in. And I was told I was behind 603 callers, which instantly I thought, oh, okay, I could be on here for a while. Started to get a bit nervous thinking, okay, no one's answering or anything. And they did eventually answer the phone, but that was at roughly around 20 to 6 in the morning.
In the morning.
So,
sorry, am I hearing this right, Lisa Marie? So you were in essence, on the phone for 7 and a bit hours?
Yeah,
waiting.
Yeah, 7:44. So
7 hours 44 minutes.
Yeah.
We raised it with the Associate Minister of Health, and it turns out Lisa Marie wasn't the only one left waiting and waiting. And joining me now is our reporter Nita Blake-Person. Nita, the Ministry's had a look into what happened, and what have they found?
Well, the Ministry started to look into this last night after they were asked to by Minister Aisha Verrall's office. She raised it with them after she spoke to you on Checkpoint. So they looked at what was going on at Healthline between lunchtime Tuesday and midnight Thursday. That was during the window that Lisa Marie called in, and they found there was an issue with one of Healthline's telecommunication providers. So that issue, and the Ministry of Health hasn't clarified exactly what it is, but it caused 92 people to be cut off after waiting on the phone for 2 hours.
Hold that thought. So 92 people had been on the blower waiting to get through for 2 hours.
And they were cut off either mid-conversation or they were on hold. So 92 people, and that's down to this telecommunications issue. But that wasn't the only issue here. Another one resulted in 60 people's calls being incorrectly prioritised. So they had to hold for more than 6 hours. And the Ministry makes specific note that that's likely to have been what happened to Lisa Marie. So that's another 60 people incorrectly prioritised, holding for more than 6 hours.
Blimey. So have they sorted this out?
Well, the first issue, this one with the telecommunications provider, is said to have been resolved. So that's good. The people being cut off after waiting for 2 hours, sorted. The second one with the call routing and prioritising, the Ministry says is being addressed. So that's being worked on. So the information we've got from the Health Ministry is that they'd like to apologise to everyone affected, but people should continue to call Healthline to get information.
Okay, so if they should continue calling, Lisa Marie told us that she thought there were very few people taking the calls at the time that she phoned in. Do we know how many people there are in these call centres?
Some of an idea. Between Tuesday midnight and early Wednesday morning, again, that window that she called in, Healthline had 36 staff rostered. It's not entirely clear if they were all working, but there were just 5 staff in the Auckland Contact Centre, and they were dealing with huge call volumes. The Health Ministry says after the announcement of that new community case linked to Papatoetoe High School, call volumes spiked massively. Most of that day, they'd had an average wait time of under 1 minute. That news came out and that jumped to 36 minutes. So on Wednesday, Healthline answered 3,744 calls. That's huge. Most of those came between 7 a.m. and 11 a.m. and they had an average wait time of 56 minutes. Still nothing on what Lisa Marie waited for. Healthline has since increased the number of staff they have rostered on by 8 times. So there has been a big boost since. And call times, the wait times rather, are now mainly under 20 minutes. So they have moved to address some of these issues.
It's kind of interesting, and I don't know if you know the answer to this. It may be a question that we still need to seek some answers to. Do we know, right? You said there's a surge in calls when information comes out. So today, for example, we are told that there's a new place of interest, KFC. When cases are announced, I'm sure there is an increase in calls. So do we know what their surge planning is?
The process doesn't seem to have been clear, and we haven't been able to clarify with that with the Health Ministry just yet. But evidently they were caught short this week, and those call volumes were just not. The call takers were not enough to keep up with the people who desperately wanted information.
Thanks, Nita. Nita Blake-Person there, just bringing us up to date on what happened with that call. We brought you the story of Lisa Marie last night. She was on the phone for almost 8 hours. And as you heard from Nita, a lot of people were on there for hours and hours waiting for answers. Now, we did request an interview with the Ministry of Health to talk about their findings and how the Healthline service scales up to meet demand. A spokeswoman said no one was available to talk to us. Sounds like one of the calls from the other night. We also asked to speak to the Associate Health Minister, Aisha Verrall, but her office pointed us to the Ministry's statement. And we requested an interview with the COVID-19 Response Minister, Chris Hipkins, but his spokesman said he was unavailable. Hold the line, caller. A program which could help bring back a dolphin species from the brink of extinction has been launched with the Prime Minister's support today. The Maui Drone Project, led by the World Wildlife Foundation, brings together science and technology experts, fishing companies and the government. Carmina Blewett has the story.
A new pilot project led by the World Wildlife Foundation hopes to help the dwindling Maui dolphin numbers recover. The Maui Drone Project aims to observe the habits of the estimated 63 individuals left. They're only found off the west coast of the North Island. World Wildlife Foundation New Zealand Chief Executive Olivia Easterhazy says tracking the dolphins with a drone will provide a better idea of behaviour.
So understanding what the pods are, how many babies have been born, but most importantly, where that habitat is, how far are they swimming?
It's not just understanding the dolphins' habits better which the project aims to find, but where they are and when they're on the move. Olivia Easterhazy says project data will help fill in the gaps about the dolphins' distribution.
We don't know anything about where they go in winter. There's been no data collected ever about where these dolphins go in winter. So even that will fill a massive gap.
The drone has been designed and built by Maui 63, a non-profit conservation group. Its backers include the Ministry for Primary Industries, contributing more than $500,000 with support from fishing companies Sanford and Moana New Zealand. Maui 63 Chief Executive and co-founder Tane Vanderboon says the drone does the bulk of the heavy lifting in terms of monitoring the mammals with artificial intelligence capabilities on board.
We've got AI running on board the drone as well, so with the camera it can spot dolphins, collect that data and then translate it to human readable format.
The orange drone can fly at a top speed of 140 kilometres per hour, at an altitude of more than 120 metres, and operate for up to 6 hours. Mr. Vanderboon wants to see technology reach beyond the scope of tracking Maui dolphins.
Maui 63's dream is to take this technology, machine learning and drones out to local communities throughout New Zealand and have teams across the country that are continuously monitoring all of our oceans. Maui dolphins are obviously the star and the Hector dolphins, but we want to get high enough resolution data that you could see anything from whales to seabirds.
The Prime Minister, who attended the launch in Auckland today, says efforts to save such critically endangered creatures are crucial. Jacinda Ardern says measures include restricting vessels from entering the mammal's habitat.
We have so few left, so we've already put in place greater restrictions around the kinds of fishing that occur in places where we know our Maui dolphins are.
Ms Ardern says the project data could be used to better protect the endangered creatures.
This new technology will help us understand with even more detail where they are, what more we might need to do to protect them and make sure we've got the right protections in place.
Jacinda Ardern says the government can help fund conservation efforts to better protect Maui and Hector dolphins. Initial testing of the drone shows it can distinguish Maui dolphins from other species with a high degree of accuracy. Ko Carmina Blewett, Tēnei.
It is 16 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Some of your feedback now. We were talking earlier about the Harbour Bridge. Concerns raised this week. It's been reinforced as much as it can be, and the question is whether it can keep up with the weight of vehicles and particularly trucks over the next few years. Some suggestions there may need to be limits put on the number of trucks going over. Michelle's got in touch. Very firm communication from Michelle. It is National Thank a Truckie Week, so why are you making it bag the truckies night? They are just doing their job. So on that basis, they would need to make everyone who's doing their job go the long way around. Someone else says banning trucks from Auckland's bridge. Think of all the unnecessary costs you can add to business. Another person says, why would you send essential vehicles like trucks on an arduous long route to make more room for more people in private cars that should be getting out of them? But on the other hand, some other people say we should buy less stuff. If you want fewer trucks, buy less stuff. Trucks should go around the long way and not over the Harbour Bridge, says this listener. And someone else, Paul, says, rely on the roads, add heavier trucks, and this is what you get. Traffic growth forecasts They're usually too conservative. Get the railway across the harbour and put tolls for trucks on the bridge. Someone else has got in touch to say, get Grandad to build a duplicate beside it because you young guns aren't up to it. Fiji police say illicit drugs more lethal than methamphetamine are being produced in the country. They've uncovered clandestine laboratories in Fiji as the drug problem there escalates. Christine Ravoy reports.
Fiji's war on drugs has been going on since the 1980s. But drugs like methamphetamine are now more easily available than ever on the streets of the capital, Suva. A local sex worker who goes by the name Monroe claims she and other prostitutes often take meth.
I've seen younger sex workers come out on the streets, not only on the streets, it's everywhere else, even undercover sex workers. And they are all in schools too, in those senses, but they do not know the effects of the drug.
For police, a growing concern is that people are now producing illicit drugs locally using very cheap and dangerous ingredients, which they make the end product even more harmful than usual to users' health. In a statement, the head of the police drug unit, Assistant Superintendent Anare Masitambua, says some people use cleaning detergent to extract sulfuric acid to cook meth. Mr. Masitambua says police had also discovered people manufacturing painkillers that could give the same high as meth.
But in other cases, they use the whole chemical, such as rat poison, to cook drugs, which could give a same high as meth, but more damaging. Means to say that people now have the knowledge to make drugs similar to methamphetamine. There's a rapid increase in the usage and seizure of methamphetamine and other synthetics. This shows that methamphetamine is locally manufactured.
The Director of Public Prosecutions, Christopher Pride, says it is estimated that illicit drug activities generate revenue of more than $5 million per annum, and local traffickers can make between $2,500 and $5,000 a day from the sale of cocaine and meth on the domestic market. Last year, police also seized more than 67,000 marijuana plants with a street value of $57 million on the island of Kandavu. And just last month, over 17,000 plants worth around $14.5 million were uprooted on Kandavu. Speaking at a meeting between police and residents on Kandavu, one of the chiefs, Ratu Kitione Raimbevu, said the issue posed huge challenges to the island's leaders.
For them, it's an issue. It also binds them to come up with a common goal, and that is to take it down to their various traditional units and address the issue. The police department is still working tirelessly with all the teams that come up to the islands to set up in terms of drug eradication. It needs a lot of support and assistance from the communities. It also needs more awareness since it deals with a lot of money.
The Defence Minister, Inia Seruratu, says the illegal drug trade needs to be eradicated as it impacts foreign investor confidence in Fiji.
Fiji has no place for drugs. I know the Commissioner of Police has aligned the Fiji Police's focus accordingly on ridding our society of all forms of illicit drugs.
While the harmful effects of hard drugs like meth are still unknown to many in Fiji, psychiatrist Selina Kuruleta says people need to realize that these hard drugs are highly addictive and harmful to their health.
Their number one priority is staying on that high for as long as they can. So keeping a job 8 to 5 is near impossible. Carrying out normal conversations is almost impossible because they're thinking about how am I going to get my next fix.
The government has recommended that people take up cash crop farming to address the problem of marijuana cultivation. Meanwhile, a magistrate has warned 5 police officers accused of planting drugs in a vehicle against interfering with state witnesses while they are on bail. The 5 officers appeared in a Suva court under heavy police presence on Tuesday. The group is charged with 1 count of conspiracy to defeat justice, while 2 of them face an additional charge of 1 count of abuse of office. The case has been adjourned to April the 23rd. Nayavangu, Christine Ravoy.
And just an update on our earlier report about the fatal police shooting in Papatoetoe. Police can confirm that Mr Tangaru Noere Turia was deported back to New Zealand from Australia in 2017. So that is the man who was killed in that police shooting today. He was deported back to New Zealand from Australia in 2017. The statement from police goes on to say, as earlier stated, Mr Turia was on active charges at the time of the incident. Police will not be commenting any further on the nature of those charges or on any specifics as the matter is now under investigation. The man who led Papua New Guinea into independence from Australia, Sir Michael Somare, has died at the age of 84. Known fondly as the Grand Chief, Sir Michael's career spanned 5 decades. He died in a Port Moresby hospital after being diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. The ABC's Bethany Harriman has this report.
You're with National Radio in Papua New Guinea in 1975, Independence Year.
On the 16th of September 1975, a young nation was born in the Pacific, and a young charismatic man called Michael Thomas Somare became Papua New Guinea's first Prime Minister.
A lot of people in this country thought, well, we wouldn't be able to do it. They were talking in terms of 2 or 3 decades, while I was talking in terms of few years. I never thought, by forming the first political party that we would be able to see it through. But then when I know that I had a lot of support from young Papua New Guineans, I thought, well, I think we should be able to make it.
The leaders of that time were young, energetic, idealistic and nationalistic. Sir Michael Somare was among those who thought it was time to free PNG from Australian rule.
During the time, I was not referred to by my name. Instead, I was given a serious number in Australian colonial territory where I once held an Australian passport. We had a few rights and our opinions were given to us. Mr. Speaker, many things have changed, and I hope that in 100 years from now on, Papua New Guinea will realize the importance of being an independent country.
It was no easy task to unite 800 different tribes and form one country. For those who watched Sir Michael's political career knew he was unique, including the ABC's former PNG correspondent Sean Dorney.
Sir Michael is absolutely unique. And there is no one else in the rest of the Pacific or Australia or New Zealand who has had anywhere near the political career that he has had.
Sir Michael's 5 decades in PNG politics wasn't without controversy, though. The changing landscape meant that younger, ambitious politicians were coming up to challenge Sir Michael.
One country, 2 prime ministers. Papua New Guinea is in the grip of a constitutional crisis.
In 2011, when Sir Michael had been out of the country for 5 months, having heart surgery in Singapore, he was disqualified from Parliament and the Prime Minister's post. He was replaced by Peter O'Neill, but it led to a constitutional crisis when both men claimed to be PM. But Sir Michael was narrowly backed by the country's Supreme Court, which found there was no vacancy in the office of the Prime Minister. It ordered he return, but the elder statesman was shouted out of Parliament.
There's a forum, there's a stranger, there's a stranger.
In the end, the people of Sir Michael's East Sepik province voted him back into Parliament in 2012. 5 years later, his political career finally came to an end, retiring and addressing the Parliament House for the last time.
We progressed through many waves and changes in the world. We survived our own bad decisions. We have united at times when the world thought it was not possible to do so. We must be thankful, and we must always count our blessings.
And that report was from the ABC. It's been 50 days since the deadly Capitol riot in Washington, and at a hearing, a senior police officer has admitted there were major failures that day, but insisted that no intelligence suggested what was about to happen, and new revelations that threats against the US Capitol persist even today. CNN's Jessica Schneider has more.
Growing frustration from lawmakers.
Why wouldn't we have
been prepared for the worst case scenario. That's what the average American is sitting home thinking about.
What I'm hearing is the same old stuff and pointing fingers, and it looks like protecting jobs.
The acting chief of Capitol Police and the acting sergeant at arms were in the hot seat, getting grilled on their lack of preparedness January 6th and the total breakdown in communication to Capitol Police officers that day.
It was very clear that their headpieces, like the communications pieces, they were getting no actual real communication. They were getting no leadership. They were getting no direction. There was no coordination, and you could see the fear in their eyes.
Acting Chief Pittman admitted there were failures.
When there's a breakdown, you look for those commanders with boots on the ground to provide that instruction. That did not happen, primarily because those operational commanders at the time were so overwhelmed. On January 6th, our incident command protocols were not adhered to as they should have.
But Pittman also pushed back to the disbelief of the committee that even if leadership had seen that FBI bulletin that warned rioters pledged to go to war at the Capitol, Capitol Police would not have planned any differently.
Even if it had moved up the chain, you wouldn't have done anything differently.
That is correct, sir. We do not believe that document in and of itself would have changed our posture. We believe it was consistent with the information and intelligence that we already had.
For the first time, Pittman disclosed the estimated number of rioters who descended on the Capitol grounds and those who made it inside.
I think that we were well in excess of 10,000 that traversed the grounds. But as far as the numbers that actually came into the building, we estimate that was approximately 800 demonstrators.
And Pittman warned that the fencing and security will remain around the Capitol for now because the threat from extremists is still looming.
They want to blow up the Capitol and kill as many members as possible with a direct nexus to the State of the Union, which we know that date has not been identified. It's prudent that Capitol Police maintain its enhanced and robust security posture until we address those vulnerabilities going forward.
And Jessica Snyder reporting from Washington with that. The Fiji Rugby League team, the Kaiviti Silktails, have sung a beautiful hymn of thanks to staff at their Australian MIQ hotel, where they've just finished 2 weeks isolation. All the players stood out on their separate balconies in Sydney, and their harmonies echoed around the amphitheatre-shaped building. For many of the players, it is their first time outside of Fiji. Have a listen. And that's all we've got time for. Have a great weekend.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Papatoetoe High School will reopen on Monday for those who can provide a negative COVID-19 result. A new testing centre will open in East Auckland tomorrow after a Botany Downs KFC worker tested positive for the virus. The man fatally shot by police in Papatoetoe last night was a 501 deportee sent here from Australia in 2017. Air New Zealand has suspended all quarantine-free flights